Hey everybody, Mary Fran Bontempo here. And before we get started with today's show, I just wanted to let you know that my new book, From Broken to Brilliant, How to Live a Brilliantly Resilient Life, is available on Amazon. Super excited about this book, which provides a roadmap of how to live a brilliantly resilient life. You'll get advice not only from me, but from so many dozens of our podcast guests who were kind enough to share their tips on how to reset, rise, and reveal your own brilliance. So head on over to Amazon, get a copy of the book From Broken to Brilliant, and now let's get on with the show. Welcome to the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. What's your train wreck? Everyone has one. The question is, are you just visiting or are you going to live there? I'm Mary Fran Bontempo. Join me and let's learn how to come through those train wrecks, not broken, but brilliant. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. Today I have with me Ursula Taylor, who is the founder of Conflict Reimagined, resolving disputes in effective, efficient, and sustaining ways. Ursula, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Mary Fran.
So you are a former litigator, so disputes are kind of your thing.
Yeah. I've spent my most of my career, my whole career, like dealing with disputes.
So you kind of pivoted here and taken this into the business world, the corporate world to a degree, but also helping individuals. And good Lord, if we ever needed help in resolving disputes, it's now because everybody is in conflict. I mean, it's just endemic through our entire society.
It's endemic through our entire society. That's absolutely right. And there is a call to action right now for all of us. If we're noticing that, if we're really sinking in and being reflective about that and what that means, there's something to that.
So let's talk about what that means. What
Mhm.
does that mean? The fact that we are constantly just at loggerheads with each other. I mean, talk about inefficiency, talk about things not getting done. I mean, how, first of all, how have you seen this grow? I think I know the answer to that. And second of all, how is it affecting us both individually and in terms of businesses?
Here's the thing. The endemic of conflict right now is an opportunity. Like that's the mind
That
blowing.
when I saw that about you, conflict is opportunity, I was like, whoa, I have to talk to this lady because I'm not getting that. But yes, tell me
Right,
about that.
right. It's an opportunity because here's the thing about conflict that's not integrated into legal systems, but we get it from mental health modalities and wellness and mindfulness. But conflict comes from human emotion. It's always driven by human emotion. And the two parties, let's say there's two parties to a conflict, or if there's more parties, whatever the situation may be, every person invested in that conflict has a human emotional driver that they are bringing to the table. There is something touched, or you wouldn't be in it. You would be rolling your eyes, you would be quickly sort of like figuring out the problem and solution and navigating. You wouldn't be driven to sort of participate it and have it continue to sort of like peck at you and sort of irritate and cause a problem. And a lot of times, if you were really reflective and we're really being honest with ourselves, if we're willing to kind of go there, we can look at a conflict or a tension point that we might have with someone and we might see a pattern. Like that's a pet peeve of mine. That's a repeated thing. That's something that reminds me of this earlier in life. You know, this neighbor reminds me of this coworker or this person I serve on a board with, or it's like we can start to suss out some patterns. And that's because we have our own human emotional piece that we bring to conflict. And we're quick to think about the problem as outside of us. We're too quick. And it is outside of us. There is a problem that's outside of us.
That's
There
the
is another
instigator of
person.
it, obviously. That's the instigator.
Right, right. The instigator. But we don't, there is a critical, important piece that we must undertake initially, which is our own conversation with ourselves. What's touched for me? What is this for me? Sort of separated from the other person, from the story. Like, what is the human emotional, the energy of the emotion, really? Like, everything is energy.
Right.
Emotion is also energy. So finding the underlying energy of the emotion within ourselves. And from there, you can get some clarity, some release, and be more effective in the strategies that a lawyer or a negotiation strategist or a mediator or somebody can bring to the table.
And I would venture to say that in the legal world, that's something that people maybe overlook a little bit. Like, and that might be why this has led you to this work, because at its basis, all of conflict has a basis in that. And yet in the legal world, understandably, it's about, okay, what are the facts and how do we get to some sort of a conclusion? But they take that piece out of it. And I think that that makes it difficult to get to a conclusion. Yes?
Right, right. In my experience as a commercial litigator, what litigation and legal process does is it perpetuates and often amplifies the conflict because you're distracted by facts, laws, and arguments. But
Mm.
facts, laws, and arguments are not the source or the resolution of any conflict ever, unless and until you're dealing with the underlying human emotional or the energy of that human emotion. And so in law, we learn to repress, to control, to ignore. We think we're elevating above it, but we're just masking it. And it's coming through in legal briefs and sort of these seemingly more professional or fancier ways, but it's the same stuff.
I find this part of the conversation just at the beginning in itself is incredibly enlightening because we do think that by focusing on logic, we are okay, we're going to put the emotions aside, but that's not even really possible because at its basis, we are bred to be emotional creatures. I mean, our fear response, our love response, all of those things are the things that we respond with first and then logic second. So I think probably by ignoring those things, you never really get to the root of it if you ignore those things.
You never really get to the root of it. That's absolutely right. And the bigger picture thing is that I feel very strongly that humanity is cusping into a new age. We had the Industrial
God, I hope so.
Revolution. Yeah, and get it. Yeah, we had the Industrial Revolution and we had the technology age. But now we have AI. Now we have artificial intelligence. Facts, laws, and arguments, we have a machine. So what's going to distinguish great leaders and great businesses and sort of the cutting edge leaders and organizations in this next phase are those people who can understand and leverage human emotion and find opportunity in conflict, find opportunity in the times we're in right now, because there is a call to sort of lift above this, really, because the fighting, it's just energizing more of the same. We're just perpetuating. When you consider that everything is energy, energy knows no politics. Energy knows no facts, laws, or arguments. So when you keep bringing the same energy, you keep getting the same energy back.
I,
So
this whole idea of it, it almost sounds it almost sounds like we're completely flipping the script on what we saw as our strength and what we saw as our weakness. Our strength was supposed to be our logic. Our weakness was supposed to be our emotion. But okay, so how do we integrate the emotion in a way that it's not escalated emotion. Do you know what I'm saying? Like there are,
I do.
I think the problem ends up when our emotions are escalated to the point where there doesn't seem to be any logic in there. So
Right, right.
how do you
Yeah.
navigate that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we are flipping the script. And it all begins with self-awareness. The power is in the self-awareness and getting through our own blocks to self-awareness. Some of us, have developed really strong, ingrained coping mechanisms that keep us out of ourselves, keep us external at all costs. And so for those individuals, this is going to be more difficult. But it's all about self-awareness and cultivating the habits and the patterns for yourself that basically allow you to slow the tape and look at your thoughts, look at your habits, your patterns with sort of an open and curious. You've got to be mindful also of your own self-judgment and shame that might block you from even looking at it. Like an example would be imposter syndrome. Maybe you have some imposter syndrome and maybe you note that for a second, but then you go into a tunnel of shame, like, oh, I have imposter syndrome. And you sort of block yourself and say, I shouldn't do that. And, have a little shame. But if you can sort of sit with it and just be open. And I think this is where leadership is so important because when it's modeled in our leaders and our mentors, it becomes easier.
So I just wrote down sit with it because that's not something that we're very comfortable doing, especially, well, let me qualify that. Sometimes people think that sitting with it is allowing the emotion to replay over and over and over again, but that's not what you mean by that.
That's not what I mean by that, but I'm glad you asked that because we have to sit with the energy and the feeling without the drama in the story because
Oh,
that's
no drama? You're going to take away my drama?
I mean, you could have the drama that brings it up, right? Maybe you have this dispute with your neighbor. Your neighbor's blowing these huge wind chimes right at your fence line, specifically to annoy you. Like as an example that I was recently dealing with a friend, and you're so infuriated and you feel like you're mad about this. Just sit with the energy of it. Like let that come up, but then kind of try to drop the neighbor, drop the story, drop the situation and just feel I tell people to feel the physical sensations of your body. Like that's what really works for me because ruminating in the story and regurgitating the drama and the
Hmm.
he said she said keeps us lower and stuck. But if we can just like sit in the physical sensation, that will take us out of our ego mind and let us be more in the energy of it. And that awareness, and from there, it's really just cultivating an ability to forgive yourself, bring some self-love, sort of these higher, more expanded energies into it and start to re-know and move that energy. And then the miracle that happens is it does release, the emotional charge does release somewhat. And you may have to come back to it over and over and over again throughout your whole life, really. But as we release the emotional charge, we can get a little more clarity about what do I need? What do I really need? And then there are strategies for negotiation and strategies for dealing with the other side.
So one of the things that I talk about in Brilliantly Resilient, and this is about the part where we're trying to access resilience, is about examining your perception. And your emotion plays a big part in that because when something makes you upset, your perception is, oh, somebody's doing something to me. And the emotion carries on with it. But to kind of pair this with the legal world, that's the point I would say at which we can say, okay, what's the truth? What are the facts? And then maybe that helps you regulate the emotion a bit
Mhm.
when you can take the steam down, like release a little bit of the steam, then you can actually look at the facts a little more clearly, right?
That's right. That's absolutely right. The emotional charge is muddling. You can't see things. It sort of blinds us. And the best of us can at least say, I'm steamed right now. Like I'm hot. Like I'm mad. That's not the time to make strategic decisions about how to handle a dispute or a negotiation or a dialogue, right? But if you can bring self-awareness and say, I'm steamed, you at least know that cultivating the ability to tell the difference from when you're steaming and when you're not is a huge that not everybody can do. But that's step one, just knowing where you're at and knowing when it's a good idea to try to solve the problem.
Yeah, I feel like we're talking about the separation of these things, but we're also talking about the sensible convergence of them and how each really should play a part in the other. And I
Mhm.
think maybe legally the effort has been and with, maybe the academic community all around, we keep trying to separate ourselves from the emotional components. But that is so intrinsic to us that you can't, first of all. You're going to feel it regardless of how much you try to squash it. So figure out where that logic fits in to making this something that's navigable.
Exactly. Exactly. The emotion is not something to be controlled, repressed, ignored, or shamed. The emotion is something to embrace as part of an internal strategy to find, feel, and release so that we're not living these repeating patterns, so that we're not operating from an emotional reactivity, so that we're not making decisions from an emotionally cluttered space. And there's, entire legal systems and beyond that talk about controlling it or separating it somehow. You can't. You
Hmm.
can't. But here's what you can do. You can release it. You can transmute it, which means sort of change it. You can, but you have to go into it. The only way out is in. You have to sit in it.
I think that's hard for people because when we have an intense emotional reaction, we automatically think we're right. I am furious about this. So somebody did something wrong to me and I'm right. So it's a really hard thing to dial that back. But to your point, that whole sitting with it, and I'm a big believer in writing things down because I've done this on a number of occasions where I just write down all my fury and then I go eat a sandwich, which is another thing I need to do
Hmm.
sometimes. And
Hmm.
then I'll come
Hmm.
back to it and I'll go, whoa, like just whoa, I need to take a breath here because
Hmm.
you do need to acknowledge that emotion. And I think that's really important, but you perhaps also need to recognize that it's not entirely justified when you look at the facts.
Right, right. What you have to deal with that emotional charge. Righteousness is real. It's part of the human experience. It's not something to be shamed. It's something to know and bring a level of self-awareness and forgiveness and compassion to. But this is why I love working with businesses, smaller to medium-sized businesses who are more closely sort of aligned to their founding principles and goals. Um, but nobody's driving their bottom line on righteousness. Like nobody is like, let me be the most right. Like, that is not what's going to get you ahead. That's not, let me make other people wrong. No, you're building, you're creating, you're serving, you're doing something, you're providing some good or service, and righteousness yields nothing. So, but it's a real human reaction that we have to contend with. So what I try to do, what I'd love to see more lawyers do is help people find that sense of righteousness and sit in it and say, okay, let's sit in this, let's feel this, what is this, and get under it a little bit. And from there, get yourself to the point, but what do I need? What do I need? And if it's being right, proving, showing they're wrong, then that's going to be tough to align to what you're actually trying to do as an organization.
To any
So,
kind of productivity.
right,
I mean,
exactly.
that people, if one version of the would you rather be right or would you rather have productivity or peace or whatever? You can be
The
right.
relation, yeah, the
And not get
relationship.
anywhere. Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
So I want to talk to you about the place of all of this in business. And you just made the point that smaller to mid-sized businesses seem to be more aligned. But before we got on the air, you also said something to me about large companies almost accepting conflict as just a part of it. So again, because of the size, because of why, and why do you think that these smaller companies are a little bit better at recognizing the importance of conflict resolution? They're smaller, I guess
Yeah,
that's part of it.
yeah. I mean, when you look at what litigation actually is and is not, and what it costs and the uncertainty, and you really give an authentic and real litigation budget and the list of assumptions that you ultimately don't control, and you say, sure, litigation is a path. This is what it looks like in an honest and real way. And you're talking to a smaller and mid-sized business, the real risk much of the time is the protracted litigation. It's not
Mhm.
winning or losing. And what I see with a lot of larger organizations, and look, the larger organizations struggle too. I used to represent national managed care plans and big health insurance companies, and but they've sort of baked their budget, right? They've sort of like baked it. This is what it costs, but they're still struggling. Their budgets are going over. They're dealing with all kinds of different pressures. But they have in-house litigation counsel and people above them that are also trained lawyers, and everybody's just sort of accepted. blame and fault and judgment and right and wrong. And here's my multi-million-dollar litigation budget. And then these are our outside counsel and just go, right? When I'm dealing with someone that where the decision makers around litigation are also the decision makers around the organization as a whole, we can make a little more progress in terms of understanding the limitations of formal dispute resolution
Right.
processes.
It's not being passed off to the other department.
Exactly.
It's we have to look at this as an entire organism, not, okay, these guys will take care of that part, this person will take care of that part. This is about the whole organism. Okay, so now when you are of the heightened mindset where you have sat with it and you have kind of navigated your energy, how do you deal with someone in the other side of the conflict who hasn't gotten there yet? Like, how
Yeah.
can you guide a conversation to try to get them at least to take the emotion down a little bit so that you can actually move forward?
Right. It's a great question. So once you're sort of your side of the fence is sort of a little more clear, kind of found and unwound some of the emotional charge and kind of figured out, okay, what do I need? There are strategies for dealing with the other side. And there's this great book by a former FBI hostage negotiator named Chris Voss, who wrote this book, Never Split the Difference. And I like a lot of his strategies, and I talk about them. You basically cultivate a sense of trust and safety in the other person to give them space to find, feel, and release. It's important that you're not susceptible to being triggered. It's really because if you're triggered, you're just going to pass the energy back and forth. But if you've
Right.
done some of your inner work or at least cultivated enough awareness to say, oh, I'm getting hot again, time to end the conversation. But if you can at least have some sensibility about yourself, what you can do is you put the focus on the other person, more talking or more listening and letting them talk, less talking. You cultivate a feeling of trust through sameness by mirroring. Maybe you're mirroring their body language, maybe you're repeating their words, mirroring the cadence of their voice and asking open-ended questions. There's a number of strategies to sort of allow that person to start to feel safe. And when they can start to feel safe, their walls can start to come down. Not all the time. It depends on who you're
Right.
dealing with and what kind of armor they have and what kind of coping strategies they have. But if you're really clear, if your emotional charge is dealt with on some level, you have self-awareness, you are grounded, you can just see them more clearly in their own stuff. And it has nowhere to go because you're not throwing it back and forth. It just stays with them. So they can either like go into it and face it, or they can just sort of sit in it, or just kind of perpetuate it within their own selves. But they're not going to have that. They're not going to have that back and forth with you. So it
Nobody's
is possible to resolve conflicts from just one side if one side is not participating in the emotional charge. It takes a lot of self-awareness. It takes a lot of sort of strategies in terms of having your own sort of grounded sense of self in those interactions. And when you do get triggered, the ability to say, okay, I'm not effective at this. And then there might be places where you do bring in other people, a mediator or other professionals, just the ability to know who is too charged up by this, who can deal with this more in a more clear way. That's value.
So one of the parts of the awareness also has to be, I'm not going to get anywhere with this person as it exists. And maybe that is the point at which you have to bring somebody else in to kind of mediate the conflict. But I
Mhm.
think that your point is so valid because, like I said, we look at the society today and it's a lot of people just screaming at each other at the top of their lungs, and nobody is really listening and nobody is really getting to the why do you feel that way?
Right,
And so is that a question that you can ask when you're dealing with an emotionally charged person? Like, hey,
right.
can you tell me why this has you so, why you are so invested? Maybe that's also you have to avoid language that says, "Why are you acting like a lunatic about this?" Like why?
Right, right, right. Well, first of all, if two people are dysregulated, two people are heated and emotionally charged, you will have no productive dialogue. if one person is sort of grounded and clear and in a place where they're like, more steady and they're not reacting and it's not going back and forth and it's one person's outburst, there are strategies for disarming the person who's having the outburst from the person who's grounded and clear. Sometimes you gotta come back, sometimes you've got to break and come back and break and come back. But you want to get yourself to a point where you can literally, maybe not out loud, but in your head, look at that other person, look at what they're in, and it might be a lot of deflection and it might be a lot of sort of toxic language and a lot of defensiveness, and just sort of observe them and just be like, that looks hard. It looks hard for you, right? They're not touching your unworthiness. They're not touching your scarcity. They're not touching your stuff because you've dealt with it. And then when you're like, that looks hard for you, what are you feeling? Can you disarm them? Oftentimes, yes. And I think when you're dealing with folks in a corporate setting who are aligned to some business goal that is separate and apart from being right and making someone wrong, there's a real shot to avoid a lot of drain and uncertainty
Because there
associated.
is a component to it that is logic and fact based, but they're, for whatever reason, emotionally attached in a way that's not moving it forward. So,
Exactly.
so this becomes about, recognizing that the emotion is real, trying to respect that, even if maybe in the output of it is toxic or negative or whatever, but respect that there's something there, and maybe, as you said, get to the bottom of it with a well-meaning open-ended question. Like, what are you feeling with this? Why, what, explain to me your attachment to this and what you're seeing, because I'm not in
Right.
the same place.
Right.
And maybe recognizing a willingness to join them, at least in terms of understanding.
Exactly. And awareness building. How did we get here? What do you need? How do you see this moving forward? Just big open-ended questions that begin with how. And it might be sort of toxic and maybe it's triggering at first and then maybe not. But you're creating this space and it might be like big statements at first, but then as you create more space for them, they start to feel into themselves because you're not serving it back. You're not like going back and forth. You're just keeping the focus on them because it's no longer about you, because you don't have a thread in this anymore, because you've released your emotional charge. You've honored it, found it, and released it, or at least cultivated enough self-awareness to know when you're heated versus not heated.
And at the end of the day, this is really all about people feeling safe, because when somebody tells them they're wrong for whatever reason, it internally, almost viscerally, gives them a feeling of, wait a minute, you're telling me I'm not worthy, you're telling me that I'm not, and that makes people immediately go to that, maybe imposter syndrome, maybe the I fought hard for this, I know what I'm doing, that defensive mode. So
Hmm.
so that idea of not serving it back to them, and recognizing that there is very legitimate concern here. Now, I mean, I'm sure there are some people that no matter what you do, you're not going to get to the other side with them. And that's probably where you have to learn to walk away. But is this what you talk about in terms of this conflict being opportunity? Like,
Yes.
tell me, to explain that a little bit more, because like I said, when I first saw it, I was like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because if you understand what conflict really is, which is human emotional energy that's within the bodies of the humans themselves, if you understand it as that, if you understand it as energy, conflict is this beautiful opportunity to find your own limitation, your own kind of emotional block, if you will, your own thing that has you a little more energetically dense and low, imposter syndrome, scarcity. Maybe it's a fear of poverty, scarcity around money, or afraid of being wrong, or just unworthiness, or whatever it is. Conflict or tension is this signal, it's this pathway, it's this. Your shoulders tense, your jaw clenches, you feel it in your body. It's a signal. It's like a light flashing. And if you take that opportunity and sit with it, you're given this beautiful opportunity to release something that's been limiting you and maybe your entire team. And from there, you can exemplify that for others. You can lead with some vulnerability if you're a leader and maybe share a little on that, and you can sort of support others in doing the same. And you build more cohesive teams, better communication, just less fear, less fear.
And you
Really.
know what? When you said this, I thought, find your own limitations, like, ew. And then I'm thinking, yay, because if you are in a business, you need to know what your limitations are so that you can build teams around you that have the strengths that you may not possess. So, to your point, when you said opportunity, I couldn't quite imagine. And then when you said find my own limitations as an opportunity, I was like, but in giving it a little bit of thought, it is the signal to recognize, okay, maybe this is not one of my strengths. I need to figure out why this makes me so uncomfortable. And then I need to find people in my team for whom this is not a problem. And they're
Yeah.
the ones that you bring on so that whatever your limitations are, you find the strength in someone else and you're building bigger teams.
Right. You can find it in someone else. I also think there's an opportunity to release whatever fear or anxiety or insecurity you're holding. Like if you're really willing to sort of look at it and drop the shame and the self-judgment and really just go into it. Like let's take for example, like I had a client who was sharing that we were going into sort of what some of these sources of insecurity or anxiety was. They were letting me kind of move a little more deeply with them. And he talked about the financial markets, right? And the changes in the financial markets. And he's lived through, the dot-com and the housing crisis and all these different things. And so we just sat with it, like just him bringing it up and saying that that was a source of fear and anxiety. And then we kind of sat with that and we talked about some different strategies, like what's the worst that could happen? Like let's go there. Let's feel into that fear or insecurity. And the miracle that happens is it releases a little bit. And then we talked about some strategies to go into it, some self-talk, some things to say when you are feeling that fear, because what you don't want to do is operate and lead from that fear, because then you're just spreading the energy. You're spreading essentially the energy of conflict. What that scarcity, that insecurity, that is the emotional energy that creates tension and conflict. But the beautiful opportunity is if you can find it, sometimes it takes a dispute or a tension point with someone to find it. But if you can find it, you can begin to release it. You can slow the tape. You can come up with your strategies through me or someone else to sort of help yourself through it. And you
Um,
release that for yourself and allow yourself to be a more fully realized human and leader, essentially.
so what I'm hearing here is, and this is kind of hard. This is really where you really have to push beyond certain things because in some ways we create these emotional kind of barriers to keep ourselves from feeling of fear, but they also create fear. So it's kind of a really complex thing. I mean, when you feel you're not good at something or when you're afraid of doing something or whatever, you kind of create this emotional energy around it and you block yourself from feeling that, but then that keeps you from really getting to the bottom of it. And to your point, seeing that maybe the worst case scenario isn't all that bad. We
Hmm.
create this picture in our minds of, oh my God, I'm so terrible at this. And what happens if I can't do this? Well, maybe what happens is it's not that big of a deal and you figure out another way. But
Right.
it's a hard thing to break through those barriers that we have built for self-protection.
It can be very hard. It can be hard for sure. And back to your earlier point, maybe the most we can do is cultivate a little bit of self-awareness and bring in a team member who can support in those spaces or areas. But getting back to what we were talking about earlier, I mean, it is hard. We have developed coping mechanisms within ourselves from early on that keep us from having to deal with our fears or insecurities. And we do them very, very well.
Yes.
But they do limit us, and conflict and tension showcases where and how they limit us. And the call to action of these times, what's going to differentiate leaders and teams in this AI-driven world, is going to be the ability to navigate the fear-based emotion with ease and efficiency and in sort of ways that sort of flow, right? They're not so debilitating. You sort of feel it, you go through it, and you flow through it. And back to an earlier point, conflict isn't a problem. Like even if it's a big blow up, even if it's something where some big words were exchanged, You might have some repair if something you really crossed a boundary, right? Of course. But it isn't a problem unless you just sort of ignore it, push it aside, and keep charging forward. If you take the opportunity to sit with that was a big reaction, that was a lot, let me just have a conversation with myself. I like to just talk out loud to myself when I'm driving alone in my car.
I do the
But
same.
that's
I
everyone is
pretend I'm on the
different.
phone and I have something in my ear, but I'm really talking to me.
We're talking to ourselves, but really sit with it and talk to yourself and kind of and you might have to come back to it a lot of times, but get to the root of it. There's an opportunity there. There is an opportunity there. That's how conflict is opportunity.
I I really resonated with this idea of having coping mechanisms to keep us from feeling our own insecurities and fears. Because really, at the heart of it, I feel like that, to reference your imposter syndrome idea, I think most of us feel like we're hiding something and we're, protecting the ourselves from the rest of the world finding out that we really don't know what we're doing all the time, which no one does.
Mhm.
But when you can maybe see that in your not only yourself, but recognize that feeling in another person, it probably goes a very long way towards kind of dousing the emotion and then allowing everybody to get to a place where they can communicate.
Mhm.
Now, I do want to get back to this idea of AI that we talked about. I want to talk about that briefly because that's terrifying people. It's freaking them out.
Mhm.
So how do we mitigate the fear of that? Because it's going to affect every part of our lives. And how do we mitigate the fear of that and continue to see that as something useful for us?
I mean, yeah, I think I would just employ all of the dealing with fear sort of strategies that I employ. Like the fear of AI would be individualized to the person, but what about that is scary and change is usually hard for most people. Change, any kind of change, right? And so if that's the source of the fear, kind of unpacking what are the other changes that you've lived through and thrived through and adapted to. In this technology age, we're constantly in change and we've been able to pivot and rely on ourselves and our skill sets and our strengths, and we know what those are, and sort of move the person into the fear and then kind of coming up with the strategies to come out of it. And it's a lot about just finding it and being able to sit in it and then say, oh, wait, I'm not going to die. I am okay. I
Right.
do. And then into gratitude and into sort of some of the mantras around gratitude. So those are just a few kind of strategies for dealing with that. But I
Well,
mean,
I think at the basis of a lot of what you're saying also though is seeing these things as opportunities. I mean, I think any major change obviously fills people with fear because it's not the norm that we have established. And establishing norms is our safe place. But it is maybe part of that strategy is again seeing where there is opportunity for growth in these places. And again,
exactly.
that's hard when it upends the way you've done things, but there is opportunity there.
Right, right. And exactly. And to your earlier point about, we have these sort of, ingrained mechanisms for coping or not finding or feeling our fear. And it's really hard and it's really challenging. The first thing I would say is that's okay. That's okay that you have those mechanisms. We all do. We are humans on this planet. We all have our ways of dealing with fear, right? We all have our ways of sort of controlling and masking. It's okay. It's completely okay. So let's just like not have any shame about it. Let's just create spaces to be like, what's yours? Well, what's yours? Well, what's yours?
What are
You
you
know,
terrified of?
what are you afraid of? And once we can have some more safety around it, then we can grow some really effective and powerful teams and leadership groups.
Well, this conversation has been fascinating to me, and I'm very happy that we're kind of closing this out on the idea of safety because this is about building safe places for people to say, okay, this has me uncomfortable, and here's why. I mean, it takes self-reflection, but then it also takes the ability to be able to communicate with other people that same feeling and maybe allow them, give them the respect of the same. Is respect a part of this? It has to be.
Respect is a part of it, but there again, coming to your own. Releasing your own makes it so much easier because
Yes.
then their words and habits and behaviors aren't so triggering. And you can just have a respect of like, they're on their path, they're in their fear, they're struggling through this. And you can have more compassion for them when you've cultivated your compassion for yourself.
Ursula, this has been a fascinating conversation, and it certainly has applications not only for the individuals, but certainly for the business world and the small to mid-sized businesses. As you said, this has got to really be a very foundational piece, I think, of building strong organizations. So thank you for that, and please tell everybody where we can find out more about you.
Sure. My website is www.conflictreimagined.com. You can link to me through the inquiry page, or my direct email is just my name, Ursula, Ursula, at conflictreimagined.com. But I would be happy to chat with any of your listeners about any actual or potential disputes to explore whether I could help.
I am so delighted, especially in this world that we live in right now, that there are actual strategies and things that we can do to diffuse some of the tension that we are all feeling. And I'm actually also happy that it's starting with a little bit of self-reflection because I think that's what where we really need to begin with. So thank you, Ursula Taylor. When this episode airs, Ursula will be a part of our Brilliance Bits, which if you need a little more brilliance, head on over to brilliantlyresilient.net. Sign up for the Brilliance Bits. You'll get some more of Ursula. And please, everybody, check this out. And let's do a little bit of self-reflecting and deal with some of this conflict in healthier ways. Ursula, thanks so much. And we'll see you all
Thank you.
next time on the next episode of the Brilliantly Resilient podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. Join our Facebook group and follow us on YouTube to be inspired with tools to reset, rise, and reveal your brilliance.